Mom, since you're retired now, we think it's only fair that you contribute half your pension to help support our family. My son Ethan announced at what he called an important family discussion in my own living room. After everything we've done for you, it's the least you can do. His wife Clarissa nodded smugly, like they were offering me some generous deal. I took a slow sip of my tea, set it down carefully, and smiled. Well then, you won't mind if I sell this house tomorrow and move to that senior community in Arizona? Oh, and Ethan, you might want to start looking for a new job since I'll be calling your boss about those recommendation letters I wrote for you. I've never seen two people's faces go from smug to terrified so fast. Hold up. I'm curious where you're listening from, and if this story spoke to you, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, what I have planned for tomorrow is going to blow you away. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this ridiculous situation. My name is Dorothy. I am 67 years old, and I just retired last month after 42 years as a high school mathematics teacher in the small town of Millbrook Valley. Not exactly a glamorous career, but I was good at it, respected in my community, and managed to save a decent pension over 4 decades of dedicated service. I raised my son Ethan as a single mother after his father walked out when Ethan was just 8 years old. It wasn't easy. Teaching doesn't exactly make you rich, but I worked extra tutoring jobs, took on summer school classes, and even taught adult education courses in the evenings just to make sure my boy had everything he needed. Piano lessons, baseball equipment, college prep courses, you name it. I sacrificed my own social life, never remarried, and put every spare penny into Ethan's future. And, for the most part, I thought I'd done a good job. Ethan graduated high school with decent grades, got into Riverside State University on a partial academic scholarship, which I supplemented by taking out a second mortgage on my little house on Maple Street. He studied business administration and seemed to be doing well. That's where he met Clarissa during his junior year. Now, I want to be fair here. When Ethan first brought Clarissa home for Thanksgiving, she seemed nice enough. Polite, well-dressed, came from what appeared to be a good family in the neighboring town of Greenfield Heights. Her father owned some kind of consulting business, and her mother was involved in various charity organizations. They had money. Not wealthy, but definitely more comfortable than we were. But I started noticing things, little things at first. The way Clarissa would make subtle comments about our modest house, how she'd wrinkle her nose at the secondhand furniture I'd accumulated over the years. She'd mention casually how her parents had just renovated their kitchen or how they were planning another vacation to Europe. Nothing directly rude, just enough to make it clear that our lifestyle didn't quite meet her standards. After they got married 3 years ago, things began to change more dramatically. Ethan, who used to call me every week just to chat, started becoming more distant. He got a job at a marketing firm in Riverside, the same city where Clarissa's father had connections, I later learned. They rented a nice apartment in the trendy downtown district, and suddenly every conversation seemed to revolve around money. It started with small requests. Could I help with their security deposit? Just a loan, they promised. Then it was wedding expenses that somehow exceeded their budget. Then car repairs, medical bills, and various emergencies that always seemed to require exactly the amount I had recently mentioned having in my savings account. Each time, they had perfectly reasonable explanations. Ethan was still establishing himself in his career. Clarissa was having trouble finding work in her field. Something vague about marketing coordination. They were planning to pay me back as soon as their financial situation stabilized. They were family, after all, and family helps each other. I wanted to believe them. What mother doesn't want to help her child succeed? So I helped. I dipped into my retirement savings more times than I care to admit. I postponed maintenance on my own home, drove my ancient Honda Civic for 2 extra years when it should have been replaced, and continued living paycheck to paycheck well into my 60s, just to make sure Ethan and Clarissa stayed afloat. But here's what really started bothering me. They never seemed to struggle. Every time I visited their apartment, there was something new. A big screen TV, expensive kitchen gadgets, designer clothes hanging in Clarissa's closet. They ate at restaurants I couldn't afford and took weekend trips to mountain resorts. When I gently asked about these purchases, given their supposed financial difficulties, Clarissa would explain that her parents had given them money, or that they'd found great deals, or that some of it was for Ethan's work wardrobe. Meanwhile, I was eating generic cereal for breakfast and clipping coupons just to help pay for their latest crisis. The breaking point came when I finally retired last month. After the farewell party at school, after turning in my keys and cleaning out my classroom for the last time, I was actually looking forward to this new chapter of my life. My pension wasn't huge, but it was enough for me to live comfortably if I was careful. I could finally take that art class I'd been wanting to try, maybe do some traveling, spend time reading all those books I'd accumulated but never had time for. I made the mistake of mentioning my retirement plans to Ethan during one of our phone calls. I told him about the exact amount of my monthly pension, not to brag, but because I was proud that my years of careful planning had paid off. I could finally relax a little. That's when everything changed. Within 2 days of that conversation, Ethan called asking if he and Clarissa could come over for Sunday dinner. Nothing unusual there. They visited maybe once a month, usually when they needed something, but this time felt different. Ethan sounded nervous, and when I asked if everything was okay, he said they needed to discuss some important family matters. I should have known right then that trouble was brewing. In my experience, when people want to have important family discussions, it usually means they want something from you. But I was still thinking like a mother, worried that maybe they were having marriage problems or health issues. I even went to the grocery store and bought all of Ethan's favorite foods, thinking I might be providing comfort during a difficult time. Boy, was I wrong about that. We poured our hearts into researching and telling this story. If you're hooked, show some love with a subscribe. Now, where were we? Sunday arrived, and I spent the morning preparing Ethan's favorite meal, pot roast with all the trimmings, just like I used to make when he was growing up. I even baked an apple pie from scratch, using my mother's old recipe. Call me sentimental, but I thought maybe we could have one of those nice family dinners we used to enjoy before Clarissa came into the picture. They arrived at exactly 2 p.m., which should have been my first red flag. Ethan is never on time for anything, but here he was, punctual as a Swiss watch, with Clarissa right beside him carrying what looked suspiciously like a folder full of documents. "Hi, Mom," Ethan said, giving me a quick, awkward hug. "Something smells amazing." "Just pot roast, sweetheart, your favorite." I smiled, genuinely happy to see him, despite my growing unease. Clarissa air-kissed my cheek, something she'd started doing after visiting her parents' country club friends. "Dorothy, you really didn't need to go to all this trouble." But here's the thing. They barely touched the food. I spent 3 hours cooking, and they picked at their plates like they were eating cardboard. Every few minutes, they'd exchange these meaningful glances, like they were having some kind of silent conversation I wasn't privy to. Finally, after I'd cleared the main course and was about to serve dessert, Ethan cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." I set down the pie server. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" That's when Clarissa opened her folder and spread several printed documents across my dining room table, the same table I'd bought at a garage sale 15 years ago and refinished myself. "We've been doing some research," she began, her voice taking on this business-like tone I'd never heard from her before, "about retirement planning and family financial responsibility." "Okay," I said slowly, looking at what appeared to be printouts from various financial websites. Ethan leaned forward, suddenly animated. "Mom, you're sitting on a gold mine, and you don't even realize it. Your pension is worth way more than you need to live on." "I'm sorry, what?" Clarissa pointed to one of her printouts. "According to our calculations, your monthly pension is $3,200, but your actual living expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, basic necessities, only come to about $1,800 per month." I stared at them. "How do you know my exact pension amount? And how do you know what my expenses are?" "You told us about the pension," Ethan said quickly. And we estimated the expenses based on, what we know about your lifestyle. That phrase, your lifestyle, was delivered with just enough condescension to make my stomach clench. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. The point is, Clarissa continued, consulting her notes like she was giving a business presentation, you have a surplus of $1,400 every month that you don't really need. Meanwhile, Ethan and I are struggling to build our future. Struggling? I looked around my modest living room at these two people who'd just driven up in a car that was newer than anything I'd ever owned. What exactly are you struggling with? Student loans, Mom, Ethan said, his voice taking on that whiny tone he'd used as a teenager when he wanted something. Clarissa's got $40,000 in student debt from her master's degree, and we're trying to save for a house, but with rent prices in Riverside, it's impossible to get ahead. We've run the numbers, Clarissa added, sliding another document toward me. If you contributed $1,600 per month to our household budget, we could pay off our debts in 3 years and have a down payment saved for a really nice home in Greenfield Heights. I picked up the paper. It was a detailed spreadsheet showing exactly how my money would be allocated to their various expenses and goals. They'd even included a timeline and projected interest savings. Let me make sure I understand this, I said carefully. You want me to give you $1,600 of my $3,200 pension every month so you can pay off your debts and buy a house? It's not giving, Ethan said quickly. It's investing in family, in our future. And really, Dorothy, Clarissa added with that fake sweet smile, what do you need all that money for? You've got this house paid off, you don't travel, you don't have expensive hobbies. You're basically just letting money sit in your checking account, earning nothing. That's when it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. This was planned, meticulously planned. I looked at Clarissa's spreadsheets again, noticing details I'd missed the first time. They knew my exact mortgage balance, 0, my approximate utility costs, even my car insurance premium. This wasn't estimation. This was research. How long have you been planning this? I asked quietly. Planning what? Ethan tried to look innocent, but his ears were turning red, something that happened when he lied, even as a little boy. This presentation, these spreadsheets, this whole intervention. Clarissa shifted uncomfortably. We're not planning anything, Dorothy. We're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Everyone? I stood up, my hands shaking slightly. What exactly do I get out of this arrangement? Silence. I mean, if this is such a great deal for everyone, what's my benefit? Besides the privilege of funding your lifestyle, of course. Mom, that's not fair, Ethan protested. We're family. We help each other. Help each other? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. When was the last time you helped me with anything? When was the last time you even asked how I was doing without following it up with a request for money? More silence. You know what I think? I continued, my voice getting stronger. I think you've been planning this ever since I told you about my retirement. I think you saw my pension as your personal piggy bank, and you spent the last month figuring out exactly how to get your hands on it. That's ridiculous, Clarissa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Because these spreadsheets didn't create themselves, and somehow you know financial details about my life that I never shared with you? Ethan's face was completely red now. Look, maybe we did some research, but that's just because we care about you. We want to make sure you're making smart financial decisions. Smart financial decisions? I repeated. Like giving half my pension to my son and his wife so they can buy a house in an upscale neighborhood while I continue eating generic cereal and driving a 15-year-old car? It's not like that, Mom. Then what is it like, Ethan? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to con your own mother out of her retirement money.
That's when Clarissa made her biggest mistake. She leaned forward with this patronizing expression and said, "Dorothy, I think you're being a little dramatic. We're not asking for your whole pension. We're asking for the part you don't need. And honestly, after everything we've done for you, helping with your computer problems, driving you to doctor appointments, checking on you, don't you think we deserve some consideration?" I stared at her. "Everything you've done for me? Well, yes, we're very involved in your life. Clarissa," I said slowly, "you've been to exactly 3 doctor appointments with me in 3 years, and that was only because you needed to borrow money afterward and wanted to ask in person. The last time you helped with my computer was 2 years ago, and I later found out you were using my Amazon account to get free shipping on your own purchases." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. "And as for checking on me, those phone calls where you check on my bank balance and whether I've had any unexpected expenses, those aren't wellness checks, sweetheart. Those are reconnaissance missions." The room went completely silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock my parents had left me. Finally, Ethan played his last card, the one I should have seen coming. "Mom, I'm disappointed in you. I really thought you'd want to help us succeed. After everything you sacrificed when I was growing up, I figured you'd be happy to see me building a good life." And that's when I realized just how deep this manipulation went. They weren't just after my money. They were trying to use my own love for my son against me, twisting my years of sacrifice into some kind of obligation to continue funding his life indefinitely. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at my small but well-tended garden, the garden I'd planned to spend more time in during retirement, the retirement I'd worked 42 years to earn. When I turned back around, they were both watching me expectantly, probably thinking they'd played their winning hand. They had no idea what was coming next. When I turned back around, they were both watching me expectantly, probably thinking they'd played their winning hand. Clarissa had this smug little smile, like she was already spending my pension money. Ethan looked nervous but hopeful, the way he used to look when he was waiting to find out if he'd passed a test he hadn't studied for.
I walked back to the dining room table and picked up their carefully prepared spreadsheets. I studied them for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "You know what?" I said finally, setting the papers down. "You're absolutely right." Their faces lit up instantly. "I am being selfish with my money," I continued, "and you've really opened my eyes to how unfair this situation has become." "Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand once you thought about it logically," Ethan said, relief flooding his voice. "I do understand, which is why I've decided to make some major changes." I smiled at them both. "Since you're so concerned about my financial planning, I think it's time I really took control of my future." Clarissa leaned forward eagerly. "So you'll consider our proposal?" "Oh, I'll do better than that. I'm going to implement it immediately." I gathered up their papers. "In fact, I'm so inspired by your research that I'm going to take it even further. If I'm going to restructure my finances, I might as well do it right." They exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean, exactly?" Ethan asked cautiously. "Well, you've made it clear that this house is too much for me, that I'm wasting money on unnecessary expenses, so I think I'll sell it." The color drained from Clarissa's face. "Sell the house? Why not? You said yourself that I don't need all this space. There's a lovely senior living community in Tucson called Desert Sunrise Estates. I looked into it a few months ago, actually. They have a golf course, organized activities, and the best part? It's only $1,200 a month, including all utilities and meals." "But, Mom, you can't just move to Arizona. What about family? What about us?" "Oh, sweetheart, you'll be fine. You said yourself that you're building your own life now. And with all the money I save by not helping you anymore, I'll be able to visit you whenever I want." "Well, assuming you want me to visit, of course." That's when the mask really started slipping. Wait, what do you mean, not helping us anymore? Clarissa demanded, her sweet facade completely gone. Well, if I'm living on a fixed income in a retirement community, I won't have any extra money to lend out. It'll be so liberating. No more emergency loans, no more covering your car repairs or medical bills. I'll finally be able to live within my means, just like you're always suggesting. But that's not what we meant, Ethan protested. We were hoping. What, dear? What were you hoping? Silence. Because it sounds like you were hoping to have access to my money while also telling me I'm too stupid to manage it properly. Nobody said you were stupid, Clarissa said quickly. No? Then what would you call it when you research my personal finances without my permission and then present me with a plan to hand over half my pension to people who already make more money than I ever did? That night, after they left in stunned silence, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and started making phone calls. If they wanted to play games with my financial information, I could play games too. First, I called my old colleague Patricia, who worked in the school district's main office. We'd been friends for 15 years, and she'd helped Ethan get his first summer job when he was 16. Patricia, it's Dorothy. I hope I'm not calling too late. Never too late for you, honey. How's retirement treating you? Well, that's actually why I'm calling. I need to ask you about something sensitive. You know how you wrote that recommendation letter for Ethan when he applied to that marketing firm? Of course. Nice boy you're, Ethan. How's he doing there? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Patricia, do you remember what salary range we mentioned in that letter? There was a pause. Oh, Dorothy, you know I can't discuss specific details. I'm not asking you to violate any confidences. I'm his mother, and I'm concerned that he might not be telling me the truth about his financial situation. You know how kids can be. They don't want to worry their parents. Another pause. Well, I suppose the position he got was entry-level, but at a good company. I think the starting salary was around $45,000, with potential for growth. And how long has he been there now?
3 years? He should have had at least 2 performance reviews by now. If he's doing well, he's probably making somewhere in the mid to upper 50s. I thanked Patricia and hung up. Then I called my neighbor Jim, who worked in real estate. Jim, it's Dorothy from next door. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what do you think houses in our neighborhood are actually selling for these days? Thinking of selling, Dorothy? Maybe. I'm just exploring my options. Well, your place is in great shape. Corner lot, that beautiful garden. I'd say realistically, in today's market, you'd probably get around $280,000, maybe $290,000 if we got lucky. So much for my $350,000 fantasy. But that was fine. I wasn't really planning to sell anyway. Next, I did something I probably should have done years ago. I went online and looked up salary information for marketing professionals in Riverside. According to 3 different websites, someone with Ethan's experience and education should be making between $55,000 and $65,000 annually. Then I looked up Clarissa's company. It took some digging, but I found their employee directory. Sure enough, there was Clarissa Morrison Hayes, marketing coordinator. I looked up salary ranges for her position too, $40,000 to $50,000. Combined, they were making between $95,000 and $115,000 per year, more than I'd ever made in my entire career. But here's what really got me. I started going through my old bank statements, looking at every loan, every emergency payment I'd made over the past 3 years. The pattern was astounding. Car repair emergency, $1,200, the week before they took a skiing trip to Aspen. Medical bill crisis, $800, 2 weeks before Clarissa posted photos of her expensive new jewelry on social media. Rent shortage emergency, $900, the month they bought a $2,000 designer couch that I'd seen in their living room. Security deposit crisis, $1,500, followed immediately by them booking a vacation to Napa Valley. Every single emergency had been followed within days or weeks by some major purchase or luxury experience. They hadn't been struggling to survive. They'd been struggling to maintain a lifestyle that was beyond their means, and they decided that I should subsidize it. I added up the numbers. Over 3 years, I had given them $23,400 in various loans and emergency payments. Not one penny had ever been repaid, despite multiple promises. But the most infuriating discovery came when I decided to do a little social media investigation. I rarely used Facebook, but I still had an account from when the school district encouraged teachers to connect with students' families. Clarissa's profile was a goldmine of information. Photos of restaurant meals that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, check-ins at expensive spas and boutique shops, and then I found the post that made my blood boil. It was from 2 months ago, right around the time they'd asked me for $1,200 to help with what they called unexpected medical expenses. The post was a photo of Clarissa and Ethan at some upscale restaurant with the caption, "Celebrating my promotion to senior marketing coordinator. So grateful for this amazing opportunity and the salary bump that comes with it. Time to upgrade our lifestyle. #blessed, #new job, #leveling up." A promotion, a salary increase, 2 months ago. The same month they'd told me they were struggling financially and needed my help with medical bills. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. They hadn't just been lying to me about their struggles. They'd been actively celebrating their financial success while simultaneously manipulating me into believing they were barely getting by. That's when I realized this wasn't just about the pension demand. This was about years of systematic deception, emotional manipulation, and financial abuse. They'd been treating me like their personal ATM, and they'd gotten so comfortable with it that they thought they could just demand a regular monthly payment. I closed the laptop and sat in my quiet kitchen, listening to the grandfather clock tick. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about Ethan's financial problems or planning how I could help him succeed. Instead, I was planning on how I could make sure he understood exactly what he'd lost when he decided to betray his own mother's trust. The next morning, I started making more calls. But this time, I wasn't calling friends for information. I was calling professionals. Because if Ethan and Clarissa wanted to treat this like a business transaction, then it was time I started thinking like a businesswoman instead of a mother. And the first thing any good businesswoman does is protect her assets. 3 days later, I called Ethan and asked him to come over for coffee. Just him, I said. I wanted to have a mother-son conversation without Clarissa's input. He agreed, probably thinking he could wear me down more easily without his wife there to witness any emotional manipulation tactics. He arrived on Wednesday afternoon, looking more nervous than I'd seen him since he was 12 and had to confess to breaking Mrs. Henderson's window with his baseball. I'd prepared coffee and set out some of his favorite cookies, store-bought this time, not homemade. I was done going out of my way. "Thanks for coming, honey," I said, settling into my armchair across from him. "We need to clear the air about Sunday's conversation." "Mom, I'm really glad you called. Clarissa and I had been talking, and we think maybe we came on a little too strong with the whole pension thing." He was using his most sincere voice, the one he'd perfected in high school when he wanted to extend his curfew.
Actually, Ethan, I've been doing some thinking of my own and some research. His smile faltered slightly. Research? I reached for the folder I'd placed on the side table, not unlike the folder Clarissa had brought to our last meeting. You know, after your presentation the other day, I realized I don't know nearly enough about your current financial situation, so I decided to educate myself. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, a printout of average salaries for marketing professionals in Riverside with 3 years of experience. According to this data, someone in your position should be earning between $55,000 and $65,000 annually. That's quite a bit more than the struggling salary you've been describing to me. Ethan's face went pale. "Mom, those websites aren't always accurate. Every company is different, and you're right, every company is different." I pulled out the next document. So, I called Patricia at the school district. You remember Patricia. She wrote your recommendation letter. She was very helpful in clarifying what salary range was discussed during your hiring process. The color was completely gone from his face now. You called Patricia? I did. And then I called Jim from next door, who helped me understand what my house is actually worth in today's market. Turns out my Arizona retirement fantasy was a bit optimistic on the numbers, but still quite doable. I set down another paper, printouts of his and Clarissa's social media posts from the past 6 months. But the real eye-opener was this little investigation. Ethan, did you know that your wife posts quite frequently about your lifestyle on social media? He glanced at the papers and his shoulders sagged. Mom, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear your explanation for this post from February, the one where she's celebrating a promotion celebration and talking about upgrading your lifestyle from the same month you asked me for $1,200 for medical expenses. Silence. Or this one, from January, where you're both at that new steakhouse downtown that charges $60 per person, posted just 3 days after you told me you couldn't make rent? I spread out more printouts like I was dealing cards. January through March alone, I count 14 posts showing expensive meals, shopping sprees, concert tickets, and weekend getaways. The same 3 months where you asked me for emergency money 4 separate times. Ethan stared at the evidence, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words that wouldn't come. But here's the part that really got my attention. I went through 3 years of financial records, Ethan. Every emergency loan, every crisis payment, every time you needed help. $23,400 total. His head snapped up. You kept track of all that? I keep track of everything, honey. It's called being responsible with money, something I apparently failed to teach you. I leaned forward. Not 1 penny has ever been repaid, despite countless promises. But more importantly, every single emergency payment coincided with evidence of luxury spending on your social media accounts. I pulled out the most damaging piece of evidence, a timeline I'd created showing the correlation between their requests for money and their documented spending. Car repair emergency, $1,200, followed by your ski trip to Aspen. Medical bill crisis, $800, followed by Clarissa's shopping spree at that boutique in Greenfield Heights. Rent shortage, $900, followed by the purchase of your new furniture set. Ethan was slumped in his chair now, no longer trying to maintain eye contact. Do you want to explain to me, Ethan, how someone who can afford ski vacations and designer furniture can't afford their basic living expenses? Mom, you don't understand. Then help me understand, Ethan, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been systematically lying to me for 3 years, using my love for you to finance a lifestyle you can't actually afford. That's when he finally broke. Okay, fine. Yes, we make decent money. Yes, we could probably live more modestly. But do you have any idea what it's like to be married to someone like Clarissa? Her family has money, real money. Her parents drive BMWs and take vacations to Europe. Her sister just bought a house with a swimming pool. I stared at him. So you decided to steal from your mother to keep up with your wife's family? It's not stealing. You always said I wanted you to be successful, to have a good life. Well, this is what success looks like now. And you have more money than you need anyway. More money than I need? I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. Ethan, do you know what I gave up to pay for your college? I took out a second mortgage on this house. I worked 3 jobs. I haven't had a real vacation in 15 years because every spare penny went to your education or your emergencies. But that was your choice. My choice was to invest in my son's future, not to become his permanent ATM. My voice was louder than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. I sacrificed my own financial security to help you build yours. And your response is to lie to me, manipulate me, and then demand half my pension so you can continue living beyond your means?
He was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a smaller voice, he said,
We really do need the money, Mom. The house we want in Greenfield Heights costs $450,000. Our student loans are real. It's not like we're just throwing money away. Ethan, you make more money in 1 year than I made in most years of my teaching career. If you can't afford a $450,000 house on your combined income, then you can't afford it, period. That doesn't mean your retired mother should subsidize your unrealistic expectations. But you could help us. It wouldn't even affect your lifestyle. And there it was, the entitlement laid bare. Even caught in his lies, even confronted with evidence of his manipulation, he still believed he deserved my money. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. This won't affect my lifestyle, because my lifestyle is about to change dramatically. I walked to my desk and pulled out another folder, this one filled with documents I'd spent the morning preparing. These are applications for 3 different retirement communities. Not in Arizona, that was just theater for Clarissa's benefit. But there are several lovely places within 2 hours of here that cost significantly less than maintaining this house. Ethan's eyes widened. You're serious about moving? I'm serious about a lot of things, including this. I handed him a letter I'd printed on my good stationery. That's a formal notice that I will no longer be providing financial assistance of any kind. No loans, no emergency payments, no gifts beyond birthdays and Christmas. He read the letter, his face growing paler with each line. And this, I continued, pulling out another document, is a letter I've prepared for your employer, thanking them for hiring such a wonderful young man and mentioning how proud I am of the salary and opportunities they've provided you. I thought I'd send it to your supervisor, since they were kind enough to hire you based on my recommendation. Mom, you can't. Can't what? Be proud of my son's success? Because according to your wife's social media posts, you're both doing extremely well financially. I'd hate for your employers to think I wasn't grateful for how well they're taking care of you. The implication was clear. If I sent that letter, it would reveal that he'd been lying about his financial struggles to anyone who'd been helping him. There's one more thing, I said quietly, sitting back down with the final document. I've made an appointment with an estate planning attorney next week. It's time I updated my will to reflect current circumstances. Ethan looked like he was going to be sick. What does that mean? It means I'm being more intentional about how my assets will be distributed after I'm gone. And I'm including provisions that account for any outstanding debts or patterns of financial irresponsibility. The room was completely silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Ethan sat there staring at the papers scattered across my coffee table, evidence of his deception, proof of his manipulation, and documentation of the consequences he was about to face. Finally, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry, I really am. We never meant for it to go this far. I studied his face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse rather than just regret at being caught. Ethan, I need you to understand something. I will always love you. You're my son, and that will never change. But I will never again allow you to take advantage of that love. The choice is yours. You can have a relationship with me based on honesty and mutual respect, or you can continue down this path and lose me entirely. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it. I think you should go home now and have a very honest conversation with your wife about what kind of future you want to build together, and whether that future includes having me in it. Ethan left that afternoon without another word. I watched him drive away from my front window, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. No more wondering when the next crisis call would come. No more checking my bank account nervously after every conversation. No more lying awake at night wondering if I was doing enough for my son. The silence that followed was both peaceful and heartbreaking. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. Part of me worried that I'd been too harsh, that I'd destroyed our relationship forever. But the rational part of me knew that if Ethan couldn't accept accountability for his actions, then our relationship had been built on a lie anyway. Then, on a Tuesday evening while I was watering my garden, Clarissa's car pulled into my driveway. She got out alone, and I could see from her posture that she was ready for battle. "Dorothy, we need to talk," she announced, marching up my front walkway like she owned the place. "Hello, Clarissa. How are you?" "How am I? I'm dealing with the mess you've created, that's how I am." She didn't wait to be invited inside, just pushed past me into the living room. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I closed the door calmly and followed her inside. "Why don't you tell me?" "Ethan is devastated, absolutely devastated. He's been moping around for 2 weeks, talking about how his own mother has abandoned him. He's barely eating, he's distracted at work, and it's affecting our entire household."
I sat down in my chair, gesturing for her to sit as well. She remained standing, hands on her hips. "I'm sorry to hear that Ethan is upset," I said, "but I think abandoned is a rather strong word for asking my son to be honest with me." "Honest?" Clarissa laughed bitterly. "You ambushed him with spreadsheets and timelines like some kind of detective. You violated his privacy by going through his social media accounts and calling his references. That's not asking for honesty. That's harassment." "Clarissa, everything I showed Ethan came from public social media posts that you published yourself and public salary data that anyone can access online. If you consider that harassment, perhaps you should reconsider what you choose to share publicly." She began pacing back and forth in front of my coffee table. "The point is, you've completely overreacted to a simple family discussion. All we did was make a reasonable suggestion about pooling family resources." "A reasonable suggestion," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Yes, families help each other. That's what normal people do." "You're right. Families do help each other. Which is why I spent $23,400 over 3 years helping you and Ethan with various emergencies. What I don't understand is why that help only flows in one direction." Clarissa stopped pacing and turned to face me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time you or Ethan offered to help me with anything? When did you last ask if I needed financial assistance or help with home repairs, or even just company during the holidays? We invited you to Christmas dinner last year at a restaurant where I had to pay for my own meal while you ordered the most expensive items on the menu." Her face flushed red. We didn't plan it that way." "Didn't you? Because I have the receipt right here in my purse. Would you like to see how my $18 salad compares to your $47 surf and turf?" She stared at me, clearly not expecting me to have documentation of that particular evening. "The point is, Clarissa, this was never about family helping family. This was about you and Ethan wanting to maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford and deciding that I should subsidize it." "So what if we did?" The mask finally slipped completely. "You have the money. You live in this tiny house. You drive that ancient car. You wear clothes from department store clearance racks. What's the point of having money if you never spend it?" There it was, the raw entitlement I'd suspected all along. "The point," I said quietly, "is that it's my money. I earned it through 42 years of work. I saved it by living modestly and making careful choices. And I get to decide how to spend it." "But you're going to die someday, and then what? All that money will just go to the government in taxes or sit in some bank account earning interest for lawyers? At least if you helped us now, you'd get to see us benefit from it." I stood up slowly, feeling my age in my joints, but steel in my spine. "Clarissa, I want you to listen to me very carefully. That money represents every extra shift I worked when Ethan was young. every vacation I didn't take, every restaurant meal I skipped, every new dress I decided I didn't really need. It represents sacrifices you can't even imagine, made for a future I hoped would include a son who respected and loved me. My voice was getting stronger with each word. You're right that I'm going to die someday, and when I do, my money will go to people and causes that have shown me genuine care and respect. It will go to the scholarship fund I'm establishing at Millbrook Valley High School for students whose single mothers are working multiple jobs to pay for their education. It will go to the animal shelter where I've started volunteering, and to the literacy program at the public library. Clarissa's mouth fell open. As for Ethan, he'll inherit this house and whatever personal belongings he wants. But the financial assets I spent decades accumulating, those will go to people who treat me like a human being rather than an ATM. She sank onto my couch, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I met with my attorney yesterday and updated my will accordingly. For the first time since I'd known her, Clarissa looked genuinely shaken. Dorothy, please. I know we made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can pay you back. We can... With what money? The money you don't have because you've been living beyond your means for 3 years? We'll figure something out. We'll get second jobs. We'll sell some of our things. Just please don't cut Ethan out of your will over this. I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse, rather than just panic about losing an inheritance. Clarissa, this was never about the money. This was about respect, honesty, and treating me like family instead of like a resource to be exploited. I understand that now. We both do. Do you? Because 2 weeks ago, you were trying to convince me that I owed you half my pension. Today, you're only sorry because you've realized there might be consequences for your actions.
She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You and Ethan are welcome to rebuild a relationship with me based on honesty and genuine care, but it will take time. And it will require demonstrating through actions, not words, that you see me as more than a source of financial support. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden, where the tomatoes were finally starting to ripen. I'm 67 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life putting everyone else's needs before my own. I'm done with that. I'm going to travel. I'm going to take art classes. I'm going to spend my money on experiences and causes that bring me joy. And if we prove that we've changed, if we show you that we really do care about you as a person, I turned back to face her. Then maybe, someday, we can be a real family again. But that's entirely up to you and Ethan. The days of me chasing after you, trying to buy your love and attention with financial support, are over. Clarissa left that evening looking far different than when she'd arrived. The entitled, demanding woman who'd stormed into my house was replaced by someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. 6 months have passed since that conversation, and my life has transformed completely. I did end up moving, not to Arizona, but to a lovely senior community called Riverside Gardens, about an hour from Millbrook Valley. It has everything I wanted: a small but comfortable apartment, organized activities, and a community of people my own age who were living for themselves rather than constantly supporting ungrateful adult children. I've taken up watercolor painting and discovered I'm actually quite good at it. I've joined a book club and made friends with women who have fascinating stories and sharp minds. I've traveled to places I'd only dreamed of: a river cruise through Europe, a photography tour of national parks, a culinary adventure through Italy. Most importantly, I've learned what it feels like to spend money on myself without guilt. As for Ethan and Clarissa, they've had to make some significant adjustments. They moved to a smaller apartment in a less expensive neighborhood. Clarissa got a part-time second job on weekends. They traded in their newer car for something more practical. In other words, they're living within their means for the first time in their marriage. Ethan has called me 3 times in 6 months, not to ask for money, he knows better now, but to check on my health and to share small updates about his life. The conversations are awkward and stilted, but they're honest. It's a start. I don't know if our relationship will ever fully heal. The betrayal cut deep, and trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I'm not consumed with worry about their financial crisis or guilt about not doing enough to help. Instead, I'm focused on my own future, my own happiness, and my own peace of mind. And you know what I've discovered? I was wrong about one thing. I do have more money than I need. I just needed to stop giving it away to people who didn't appreciate it. Now I'm using it to build the retirement I actually want, surrounded by people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. If you're dealing with family members who treat you like an ATM, remember this. You taught them how to treat you by allowing it. But it's never too late to change the rules. Set your boundaries, stick to your principles, and don't let anyone, not even family, manipulate you into betraying your own financial security. Your future self will thank you for it. And if anyone tries to tell you that family should always come first, remind them that respect and honesty should come first. Everything else is negotiable. 2 more compelling stories are just a click away. If this one drew you in, wait until you see what else we found. Ready to explore?